Thanks for joining us here at Rose Quartz Mediumship Podcast, where we simply adore anything and everything healing and metaphysically based. I want to tell you a story about a client of mine, a one-on-one coaching client, who has had some really profound shifts in her reality. About a year ago, she was working through something really big. And she asked me if I would be willing to do an entire day of coaching with her, to come to her house and sit with her and work through some patterns, some shadows, some blocks that she was experiencing. She recognized that she really wanted to dig deep, and we were seeing each other once a week for 1-hour sessions. And I said, absolutely, it's something that I do. So happy to schedule this with you. So we scheduled this day of healing, and I went to her house, and we sat on our couch, and we talked about all sorts of stuff. And it was early spring, and it became really pretty as the day progressed. And she wanted to go out and sit on her porch. She had a couch on her porch. So we went outside, and if you know me, you know that I am pasty white and burn pretty easily. And I hadn't brought any suntan lotion or a hat or anything like that because it was early spring and I just wasn't in the pattern of that. And so we were sitting on her porch, and she has this beautiful darker skin, tans up with just stunning color. And so we're sitting out on her porch. And I took my sweater and I stuck it over my head because I could feel my head was sunburning on the part of my hair. And she looked at me and laughed, and she's like, "You look ridiculous." And I said, "I don't. I look phenomenal." And she laughed and she's like, "No, you look ridiculous." And I said, "No, I look phenomenal." And she said, "Why? Tell me why you think you look phenomenal." She said, "You look ridiculous with that sweater draped over your head." And I said, "I don't care what I look like, which makes me look phenomenal." And she reached for her phone and snapped a photo of me. And this was about a year ago, maybe just over a year ago. And at the time, I was still drinking Diet Mountain Dew. So I'm holding Diet Mountain Dew in my hand with this sweater draped over my head. And she snaps a photo of me. And she's like cackling. She's laughing so hard at me. And we got into this conversation about how I believed that I looked phenomenal, that I didn't care what I looked like. I was protecting my head from getting sunburned. I was enjoying the sun. And I thought I looked phenomenal. A couple days later, she texts me the photo. And she's like, "You still look ridiculous," right? And I laugh and I write back and I say, "I look phenomenal." And a year goes by. And she has done some really, really profound work on herself. Like the not comfortable work where you dig in really deep. And I've been seeing her weekly for a couple of years now. And she's changed drastically during that time. And I feel super blessed because I get front row seats to her healing journey. And I get to witness all of the shifts that this phenomenal woman is experiencing and the ripple effects of those shifts in her life. And so a year goes by. And she texts me picture, the photo from that day. And she said, "I get it now. You look phenomenal. And so do I." And watching her get it, because that entire day that we spent together working on these patterns, working on these self-limiting beliefs, working on this trauma that was held in her nervous system and in her body, all she was trying to get was to understand that she is enough. She always has been. She always will be. And in the moment, she couldn't see it. Just like so many of us can't, myself included. It's like layers of an onion. But to see the difference that a year made for this woman, and she still talks about that day. She will bring it up to me frequently and say, do you remember that day that we spent the whole day working on stuff and the shift that came out of me as a result? She said, I've been 9 months integrating what we unpacked in that day. And this year, she knows that she's phenomenal. And she knows that she's enough. And that doesn't mean that there aren't moments where she questions it, but she knows it. And so she texted me the photo the other day and was telling me how she recognizes that I looked phenomenal and that she also is phenomenal. And we text back and forth about what a shift a year makes in our healing when we are really present with our healing opportunities. And she carried this story from the time that she was little, that she was too much. It was a wound that she experienced in childhood, that she was too much, that she needed to make herself small. And as we do, she married somebody who told her that she was too much, who genuinely believed that she was too much. She needed to make herself smaller. And we just got done our weekly coaching session. And I've been working with her on that wound of feeling like she's too much for quite a while now. And she's gotten it. She genuinely gets that she is not too much. That she never has been too much. She never will be too much. The problem is that she was trying to bring all of her to someone who couldn't hold it. And so for that individual, it is going to feel like too much. And for that individual, she would be and is too much. But she's not too much. She's too much for him. But she is not too much. And she's really gotten that. And I was talking to her about if she was a gallon of water and she was trying to pour a gallon of water into an 8-ounce cup, the 8-ounce cup would feel like a gallon of water was too much. That 8-ounce cup would feel like it was drowning in water. The problem is not the gallon of water. And frankly, the problem is not the 8-ounce cup either. The problem is when you try and pour a gallon of water into an 8-ounce cup that can't possibly hold it. And we have been working really hard on that concept, not just cognitively, right? She cognitively, cerebrally could understand those concepts, but the trauma that she was holding in her nervous system and in her body didn't allow her to feel that truth. She knew it up here in her mind, but she didn't feel it in her body, in her soul, in her heart, in her being, in her essence as a human. She still felt like she was too much. And when that shifted, we really started working on how much of the story she was telling. Because so frequently we will tell this much of a story that's this long, right? And if we only tell the part of the story where we quote unquote fail or we are struggling, and we don't tell the rest of the story, then the story that we're telling is that we failed, or that we were too much, or that we were whatever. But when we look at telling more of the story, but what happens next? What happens after you leave the relationship? You find yourself? You embody your self-worth? You embody authenticity and uniqueness? You own who you are? You're unapologetic about who you are? You chase your dreams and your desires? Tell that part of the story too. Don't just tell the part of the story where the relationship failed. Tell the part where you picked yourself. If you just tell the part of the part of the story where you were in a relationship where somebody wasn't treating you the way that you wanted to be treated, then it's going to look like there's a problem. But what if you start telling the part of the story where you picked yourself and you left the relationship? What if you tell the rest of the story about how picking yourself and leaning into your authenticity and being unapologetic about who you are, owning it, owning who you are? Tell the rest of the story, and it's going to feel different. And she started working on that. And she started embodying it. She started feeling it in her nervous system. When she told more of the story, she recognized, she was only telling the part of the story that reinforced her old wounds. Her wounds said that she was too much and not enough simultaneously. And so she would pick the parts of the story that reinforced that story that she was holding from her wounds. And as she started telling more of the story, she started to challenge the stories that were being held in her mind and in her nervous system that said that she was not enough and too much all at the same time. And all of a sudden, she went through a big shift. She really started to feel it in her nervous system. She started to recognize that she was enough and that she was not too much. And immediately, someone came into her reality who could hold a gallon of water because they weren't an 8-ounce cup. She didn't feel like too much to him. But first, she had to not feel like too much for her. And when she became unapologetic that she was and is a gallon of water, she stopped looking for 8-ounce cups. She stopped trying to pour herself into an 8-ounce cup. And I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with an 8-ounce cup. But there's a lot wrong with an 8-ounce cup if you're trying to pour a gallon into it. And so when she recognized that she was not too much, she was able to find someone who was unafraid that she was a gallon and not an 8-ounce cup. Because he wasn't looking for an 8-ounce cup. If somebody had offered him an 8-ounce cup, it would have felt insufficient, inadequate. It would have felt like it wasn't enough. And so really stopping and pausing and asking yourself, what is the frame of reference that I am approaching life or this story that I'm telling myself from? If I can hold a gallon and somebody offers me 8 ounces, it's not going to feel like enough. Just like if I am a gallon and I'm trying to pour myself into an 8-ounce cup, it's going to feel like too much. If I'm telling the part of the story where I struggle, but not the part where I thrive, then that story is going to make me feel away. So, I just want to invite you to look at the reference point from which you are telling a story about yourself, about a dynamic, about a relationship, about a situation. Maybe the problem is not you. Maybe the problem is that your wounds and your trauma are only allowing you to tell a small part of the story. And when you create a sense of separation from your wounds and your trauma, and when you see them, and you begin to tell more of the story, you're going to feel a different way. And when you feel a different way, it's going to bring different experiences and people into your reality. And that is the absolute power of healing. I really appreciate you being here with us. And if you found this helpful, I would love for you to share it with someone in your reality who you think might also need to hear this message. And I hope you have a beautiful morning, day, evening, or night, wherever it is that this podcast is finding you.